You ever been to one of these? Almost half of Europeans live in a place like this or something like it. Europe was built to fight the cold, because in the colder climate in the wintertime, we can't live outside, we'd freeze to death. And so we built these big apartment complexes that were very efficient. Efficient because they have in the basement usually a heating system called central heating. And from that central place, they heat the whole building and everybody stays warm. This is the only way to do it in Europe, because it's so cold and heating is so expensive, we have to cut the cost and huddle people together in these kinds of apartment blocks. So that's why I wonder, if you're an African from a place like this, why would you want to come to a place like this? I don't get it. Do you even understand that most Europeans living in these apartment complexes dream every night of making enough money so they can move to Africa and live there? Why at this point would any migrant even still want to come to a place like Paris or London or Rotterdam? These places are horrible, even if the city center looks kind of nice. The outer rings of these cities where you actually have to live look like this or this. They're absolute shit places. In Europe, you have to be rich to have it well, but most people aren't rich. Like I said, Europe was built to withstand the cold. It was not made for living comfortably.
Looking at this from a Eurocentric perspective, I think it would be fair for anyone to agree with you on this, Johannes. It would be the most honorable thing to do to agree with you on this. I mean, why would someone living in this, as you claimed, really want to move to a place where people live in this? Honestly, I think it's really unfathomable, or should I say enigmatic, so to speak. However, if any of you watching this video have ever watched any of the Scooby-Doo cartoon series, you would understand that the lesson Scooby-Doo always tries to teach us is that the real monsters are always humans. It doesn't matter how long it takes them to unravel the mystery. They always find out that real monsters are humans. So what if we flipped the switch and asked the same question from an African perspective? If we took a sincere look at the root cause of why Africans move from here to here, we might be able to demystify this inscrutable idea of why people would really move from a place like this to a place like this. Maybe I have to joggle your memories a bit. Something could ring a bell. Now, approximately 600 years ago, some European marauders, your forefathers, arrived on the shores of what is now known as West and Central Africa to forage for food. They left their heavenly places in Europe, they left their advanced, civilized Disney World castles, like they left this to places like this in Africa. To be honest, some of us Africans are still trying to fathom the reason why your forefathers built ships and started sailing all the way to Africa that actually had nothing but poor, primitive, uncivilized, barbarous, and benighted people. We are still trying to figure it out why. None of you has been honest enough to tell us why those ships left the shores of Africa with items your leaders, your forefathers needed to keep all of you alive. None of you have been able to tell us. We are still trying to figure it out why these visitations never ended. Why they didn't end? They came once, they didn't end. We can't juxtapose the fact that your forefathers sat in Berlin between November 1884 and February 1885 at the Berlin Conference without the presence of a single African. Not a single African leader was present. Your forefathers sat there to split the continent of Africa like a pizza. And the fact that you all came to save us, just like this snake is saving this fish from drowning. We can't juxtapose how your forefathers actually came to save us from dying from hunger and then leaving our shores with food items for you. You continued to stay for hundreds of years until it was our human capital you started extracting. Now, we may not be able to understand why your forefathers, I mean those Marooners who came here to rob, to plunder, couldn't stay in Europe and enjoy all these good things, right? All these riches and all this technology you guys had that nature blessed you with. But I can help you to understand why some Africans, I can help you to understand the reason why some Africans are leaving this to this. It is simply because your Ajibole forefathers and their great grandchildren till now have turned Africa from this to this. Simply put, it can be explained as the circumstance dictates the actions. That is why. I can also help you to understand that if not for Africa, you, Johannes, and the likes of you would have been extinct by now.
Well, well, well. So, I think it is really part of human nature that we desire that we don't have. So, looking at it from that perspective, that could probably tell why, from the very beginning, we were a very mobile. Like I can call that mobile. I can use that term, species of animal. We move from one place to another, and we desire that we don't have. In fact, sometimes overlooking what we have. Hello, my good people. Welcome back to the channel. Let's have this discussion. Well put. That the only reason why many Africans and many Africans are gravitating towards Europe, America, and the so-called the global north or the Western world is because they really think there's something that they don't have. Maybe I don't know if it is the tall buildings, but well, in Africa there are also lots of that, or the advanced technology, the good life by the standards of who is trying to define what good life is. I mean, that is what they're looking for, or what we, the human beings of today, have decided to place value into. So that is what is being probably hidden or accumulated or put away from those that are in the continent of Africa, and that's why they desire to move and go and try to seek that. In that process, many horrible things are happening along the way. We know that many Africans are losing their lives during those dangerous and perilous journeys across the Sahara Desert and across the Mediterranean Sea, trying to reach Europe and attain that European dream and try to change the status quo. But going back in time, let's time travel a little bit. Maybe that is the same desire that actually from the very beginning brought the white man to the continent of Africa. I had been called marauders. They were marauding around trying to get something to feed on, to put their hands on. And somehow, by sheer luck, by sheer chance, they stumble upon a continent of black people and vandalized it, trying to get as much as they could for themselves and the generations to come. And really, when I talk about vandalized, that is just, we all know that is just an understatement, because they stole everything possible to be stolen. Everything possible. If there is anything they didn't steal, because it became practically impossible to do that. They stole land, but because you cannot carry land, that's why there's land in Africa today. Had it been possible to airlift or by some magical means lift land from Africa and take it to Europe, there would not be any piece of land lying in Africa today. They stole the natural resources. They continue to do that today because that is very, very needed, as you have heard, very needed for their survival. France got 80% of uranium from a country like Niger. 80% of their uranium, at least 80%, that powered their France. The ironical bit of it is that Niger, that is a producer of uranium, during all the vandalism and exploitation of their uranium, was in darkness. This is not to fail to underscore the problem of leadership of African states, but I can tell you for sure that even when we introspect into the leadership and the so-called the poor leadership in Africa, it's funny that it gets its way back, it spirals back again to the same people, the white people, as a form of colonial legacy, that they even play a role into that very so-called existing leadership, the poor, corrupt leadership of Africa today. To be honest, Africa has built Europe, and not only Europe, but the entire world. Be it in natural resources or human resource, Europe is built by blood and sweat of Africa and Africans, to be honest. But really, see, the point I'd love us to address is Europe is full of African resources that Africans don't even have an idea that the resources are there, let alone having gotten any sort of compensation whatsoever for the resources, to be honest. And when you see Africans moving in, leaving their homelands in droves, is because while they should have gotten compensation for the fruits of their labor and the fruits of their land, they didn't get that. And the fruits are being enjoyed and being eaten by someone else. And it is just natural then that the people are trying to move to go and also get that. Evidence really exists of even African artifacts stolen from Africa, but that Europe feels like they own the artifacts. Ironically, because they usually give some really reasons, funny reasons, like they are keeping them for Africa or for the world to see what Africa looked like. I don't know. Whenever they just put labels there, and what I believe in, them going to an extent of thinking that the art that was in Africa that they stole and now they claim to be preserving does not really become art because they decided that it was art. After all, if it was going to rot in Africa, then so be it. It is our property. We made it. If we want to let it go to waste, then that should be our problem. I don't know what really would pain you as someone else from Europe if Africa is not taking care of its own self, and now you're interfering. We have many white people in Africa who even claim to be Africans, and Africa is for black people. Black people, be they in Africa, in the continent, or in the diaspora as immigrants or as descendants of Africa in the Caribbean, in America, in Europe, and wherever else. Africa belongs to people of melanated complexion, black skin. There is no way a white person is an African, because basically it is an adaptation for us as black people to be there on the equatorial warm climate so we can sustain. So for you as a white person, you are naturally have been adapted to stay in the cold, like that guy has said. So there is no way you're forcing yourself onto being African. Maybe you might want to say that also there is no point in black people forcing themselves into Europe or into America. But there's actually no black person that really forces themselves into being an American, really, a white American or a European. It's only not, were it not for the fact that the so-called African Americans are children of Africans stolen from the land of Africa, they would never have found themselves in such a circumstance. Were it not that Africa is so vandalized, left, right, and center, and there is a desire to follow our resources to where they're going to benefit. Had all the resources been really benefiting the land and the continent of Africa, there would be no desire, there would be nobody crossing the Mediterranean Sea to go forcefully to find themselves in those cold climates that were not even naturally built for. But you find white people coming to Africa and claiming to be Africans, to belong here in South Africa, in Kenya here, in every other part of Africa. You'll find Arabs claiming to belong to the continent of Africa. I can tell you for sure, it is because there is something that they are getting from Africa, and there is so much Africa that is Africa offers, and they don't want to leave that. Imagine white people in South Africa own 80% of privately owned agricultural land. Lie to me, use whichever lies that you can to convince me that they bought 80% of land owned privately in South Africa. How do you want to expect someone getting all that to leave that and go back to Europe? Europe in itself, where when they left Europe to spread to go and vandalize America, because white people just went to America the day and say shamelessly they discovered Africa, they discovered America. They didn't discover America, neither did they discover Africa. Africa had us roaming around peacefully, comfortably. America had people living peacefully and comfortably, and so was Australia. But they discovered, because of their barbaric behaviors, they were unaliving each other in Europe. And they were running from themselves. And they found themselves in America. And they continued the barbaric behavior of unaliving people. And that's why they annihilated completely the people that were living there originally. They decimated populations in whichever place that they visited. They tried to do away with black people. It's only that we black people are very, very resilient. And we stood ground, but we have been threatened. Our existence has been eternally threatened. but we have stood ground, and it continues to be threatened. Clearly, we have evidences of how they're going to depopulate Africa. Why do you want to depopulate Africa? The only reason sometimes why we still hold on to this beautiful continent of Africa, and when I talk about we holding on to, I'm talking about all of us as Black people in and out of the continent, is because we are the only ones who can exist in this hot, warm weather. And probably the only reason why, after dividing Africa into like pieces of cake for themselves, they left eventually, because they're not built for this continent. They're not built for this climate. And maybe one of the reasons why we still hold on to this beautiful region that we call the motherland, Al-Kebula. Well, I don't know what you think about this. I'd love to really get what your views are in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up. Share this video with your friends and your family around. Hit the subscribe button, most importantly, to support this channel and to be part of this family. So until next time, I will be the happiest to see you in my next video. Peace out.